Welcome to The Explainer. For decades, the narrative around aging has been pretty grim. It's always been framed as this inevitable decline, right? Just a slow, unavoidable loss of our physical and mental sharpness. But what if the latest data completely flips that script? Today, we are exploring the absolutely thrilling concept that we can actively protect, defend, and literally regrow our brains. We're going to build a comprehensive two-pronged defense strategy based on some of the most fascinating clinical and pharmacological research out there right now.
It's a terrifying question, isn't it? Is cognitive decline inevitable? We all have this deep-seated fear that as the calendar turns, our brains are just destined to shrink and fail us. But the myth of unstoppable, age-related brain shrinkage is officially shattered. The science says you are not just a passive passenger in the aging process. You actually have agency.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The shrinking brain threat. 2. Reversing atrophy with exercise. 3. The diabetes-dementia connection. 4. SGLT2 inhibitors. And 5. Your brain defense strategy.
Section 1. The shrinking brain threat. The physical reality of brain aging.
Let's start with the physical reality of what's actually happening inside our skulls as we get older. We really need to reframe the aging brain. It's not just about a fading memory, it's a physical structure that is constantly under attack by the passage of time and physiological stress. And here is the stark truth, 1 to 2%. That is how much the hippocampus, which is the absolute critical center in your brain responsible for learning and memory, typically shrinks every single year in late adulthood. This physical deterioration happens first, and it directly leads to memory impairment and spikes the risk for dementia. Losing up to 2% of your memory center annually is a massive, massive structural loss.
Section 2. Reversing atrophy with exercise, the lifestyle defense. But here is the amazing news. We can actually fight back. A highly rigorous 120-person randomized controlled trial published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences set out to see if physical activity could literally change the size of the brain. They split older adults into two groups, one doing moderate-intensity aerobic exercise and the other doing basic stretching and toning as a control. And don't worry, no one was forced into spandex for this. The results were a stark contrast after just 1 year. The stretching group experienced that expected standard decline we just talked about, losing about 1.4% of their anterior hippocampus volume. But the aerobic exercise group, their brains didn't just stop shrinking, they literally grew. They added over 2% in volume to the left anterior hippocampus and nearly 2% to the right. No way, right?
Think about what that data actually means in the grand scheme of human aging. By growing the hippocampus by roughly 2%, that aerobic exercise intervention effectively reversed age-related brain volume loss by 1 to 2 full years. In just 12 months, these individuals quite literally turned back the biological clock on their brain's memory center. That is a total game changer.
So how on earth does walking make your brain bigger? Well, the secret lies in a molecule called BDNF, or Brain-Derived Neurotrophic Factor. I love to think of BDNF as miracle grow for your brain. The researchers found that aerobic fitness dramatically boosts the serum levels of this exact protein. BDNF mediates the growth, the survival, and the proliferation of brand new neurons. It is literally providing the exact molecular fertilizer your brain needs to structurally expand that anterior hippocampus.
Now, you might be wondering, do I need to train for a marathon to get this BDNF? Not at all. The protocol used in the study is incredibly accessible. Participants started off walking for just 10 minutes a session. That's it. Then, they increased that duration by 5 little minutes each week until they hit 40 minutes. The final maintenance dose was just 40 minutes of moderate intensity walking 3 days a week. That is the whole shebang. That highly actionable, simple protocol is exactly what reversed a year or two of brain aging.
Section 3. The diabetes-dementia connection, metabolic risk factors.
Let's pivot and see how this builds into our second battlefront. While physical inactivity starves the brain of growth factors, metabolic dysfunction actively damages the brain's delicate structures. We really need to look closely at the relationship between metabolic diseases, specifically diabetes, and cognitive decline. The data tells us that having type 2 diabetes bumps up a person's risk of developing dementia by about 1.5 times. Why is that? Well, chronic hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar, and insulin resistance absolutely wreak havoc on the brain's ecosystem. They severely disrupt the blood-brain barrier, and that leads to dangerous beta-amyloid deposition. Yep, the exact same plaques associated with Alzheimer's and chronic neuroinflammation. Essentially, metabolic dysfunction creates a highly toxic environment for your neurons.
Section 4. SGLT2 inhibitors, unexpected neuroprotection.
And this brings us to a massive systematic review and meta-analysis recently published in Frontiers in Endocrinology. Researchers were looking at patients with type 2 diabetes, and they discovered that a specific class of diabetes medications called SGLT2 inhibitors is providing an unexpected yet incredibly powerful layer of brain armor against that metabolic damage. Traditionally, these anti-diabetic agents are famous for lowering blood glucose and protecting the heart and kidneys, but the latest science reveals that their ability to modulate metabolic pathways does something absolutely amazing for the mind. They reduce oxidative stress and provide systemic anti-inflammatory effects that directly protect the neurovascular units up in your brain.
And the numbers from the meta-analysis brilliantly illustrate just how effective this is. Compared to other therapies, patients using SGLT2 inhibitors saw their relative risk for vascular dementia absolutely plummet to 0.49, which is effectively a 51% reduction in risk. For Alzheimer's disease, the risk drops significantly too, showing a 32% reduction. These are not just minor statistical bumps, folks. These are massive, real-world reductions in risk.
When digging into the data compared directly against other common diabetes medications like incretin therapies, SGLT2 inhibitors show a much lower risk profile across the board. What's absolutely crucial here, though, is that the cognitive benefits were especially massive and highly significant for older adults, those over the age of 65. So the very population most at risk for dementia actually reaped the largest protective rewards.
Now, not all drugs in this class performed exactly the same. The research highlighted one specific standout star, empagliflozin. It demonstrated the most consistent protective effect against dementia out of the whole group. Why? The researchers believe it all comes down to its specific pharmacological properties. Specifically, it has really high permeability, meaning it's exceptionally good at crossing the blood-brain barrier to directly inhibit neuroinflammation and protect both neurons and the crucial glial cells, which are basically the brain's built-in support staff that keep the neurons alive.
Section 5. Your Brain Defense Strategy. Synthesizing the two prongs.
So what does this all mean for us today? We've explored the power of kinesiology through aerobic exercise, and we've explored the power of pharmacology through targeted metabolic control. Now let's synthesize these two distinct battlefronts into one unified, actionable message of hope. You can build a comprehensive wall against cognitive decline. First, defend physically. Just 40 minutes of moderate aerobic walking 3 times a week. Second, defend chemically. Use that physical activity to flood your brain with that BDNF fertilizer. Third, defend metabolically. Keep that blood glucose in check to starve off neuroinflammation. And finally, for those managing diabetes, defend medically. Talk to your doctor about the targeted neuroprotection offered by SGLT2 inhibitors.
I want to leave you with this direct, profoundly empowering quote straight from the researchers of that PNAS study. Loss of hippocampal volume in late adulthood is not inevitable and can be reversed with moderate intensity exercise. You are not helpless, your brain is plastic, it is highly adaptable, and it is just waiting for you to give it the tools it needs to thrive.
We've seen the science, right? The cure for a shrinking brain isn't some far-off science fiction. It might literally already be in your sneakers or your medicine cabinet. You hold the power to alter the physical structure of your mind. So the only question left is, what step are you going to take today to protect it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.